Good afternoon, everyone. I'm following a very inspirational segment, and I'm standing between you and lunch. So please give me a couple more minutes of your time. I'm going to chat to you today about collaboration and community and the changing role of banks as we see it. Maybe to start, FNB Namibia is part of the broader First RWANDA group, and we have a vision to help build a globally competitive Namibia. We approach the market, our customers and stakeholders through a set of promises, which includes being deeply invested, valuing our differences, building trust in our territory, having courage, always doing the right thing, and particularly in a topic like we're talking about for these 2 days, to stay curious, to innovate, and to try new things. We've chatted a lot this morning about the need to build thriving and resilient communities. We've heard various stats, including that more than 40% of the Namibian population and up to 50% of the urban population live in informal settlements or backyard shacks. In addition to offering sophisticated financial services, as a bank, we really need to address a lot of the basics. We see a few building blocks in this roadmap to sustainability, including facilitating an enabling environment, lifelong learning, and focusing on financial inclusion and well-being. If we look at the market from a bank's perspective, we've heard, as I've said, quite a lot of stats around the market, but from a banking perspective, we see about 82% of the total market can only afford a housing loan under 500,000, with a further 14% affording a housing loan between 500,000 and 1.5 million. These are what we would call below small and small home loans. In FNB's book, that is about 60% of our book. So it is a segment that we play in, but the housing need has really never been higher. We really need to think differently as we move the market from inertia to ownership. We've talked about affordability a lot this morning, and there is a big focus on affordability, but also on access. And not only access to land, to housing, to affordable building material, but access to financial literacy, so understanding the basics of budgeting, saving, investments, and even loans and how they work, what an interest rate is, what a term is, how you pay back. So financial literacy, but also access to simpler processes. Many of you will have gone through a home loans process. It's not particularly easy. There's a lot of paperwork. It's a long time. It's a long process. And really, I think in looking at the market, finding simpler and simpler to understand, quicker processes has been very important for us. So we recognize that we can't do this alone. We talked a lot this morning about partnerships, and as FNB Namibia, we've created partnerships to help build houses. One of these is Development Workshop Namibia, who we've also heard quite a bit about this morning, and who will speak to you directly after lunch. Maybe for the purposes of this presentation, a quick summary of one of the areas, which is providing service land or plot of land. So for this, Development Workshop has a fund from which they then pay contractors to actually service the land. These plots of land are then sold to local community members, as we heard about as well in the Caribou study, who pay back those plots of land over a year or 2-year period. This then replenishes the fund, and Development Workshop can move on to other sites. Development Workshop also works in conjunction with local town councils to title the land in parallel to servicing it. So in our discussions with Development Workshop, one thing that became quite clear is that after community members have paid off their land, they then also need to be able to build a house on it. And that's where access to finance became important. But another thing is that these are often not individuals who would typically fit a banking profile. So often they don't have formal employment, pay slips, 6 months of bank statements, the sort of normal expectations that if you go to a bank, you need to fulfill. So we put together a pilot program, which we've been running and working on for about 2 years. And I think our case study is really just to illustrate the level of investment, of innovation, and of understanding that is required, particularly as a much more traditional bank serving a much more traditional market, to really get into the space. So we launched about 2 years ago. We focused on areas around the Okahout or Shakati area where Development Workshop had serviced some land and clients had already paid off plots of land. Our premise was that these clients might not have typical banking profiles, but they have shown a history and an ability to repay for a plot of land. And we could use that as a basic credit mechanism or credit criteria, as opposed to the list I chatted about earlier. We went in with a personal loan offering, and again, in terms of banking products, you get your secured products like your home loans and your unsecured products like personal loans. And the reason we focused on a personal loan in this pilot was because the land didn't have a title yet, and typically you don't offer a home loan on untitled land. So we launched with that, a personal loan up to 5 years repayment term, up to $50,000, again to enable clients to start building houses. One of the things we quite quickly realized is that community members didn't actually have building plans, which is a prerequisite to starting to build and also to get a loan. So Development Workshop then put together a standard set of plans, building workshops to teach community members how to build a house. We'll show them and using these plans. We continued on our journey, but didn't see a lot of take-up on this product, and so commissioned some market research on the Development Workshop clients to better understand what was going on. And a couple of key things came out of this research. One was just basic awareness of the partnership, of the product, and of how it all worked. The other was education, so financial literacy, so not being sure how to apply, what the eligibility and documentation criteria were, how the application process worked. The third was then a concern around interest rates, and I'll touch on that again a little bit later. But we focused first on awareness and education. And so what we did is we went into partnership again with Development Workshop more deeply and trained their staff to actually help their own customers complete F&B personal loan applications. So they actually have all the paperwork, all of F&B's paperwork. They've been trained on how to complete it. And we have a dedicated fulfillment team at our offices who interact with them directly in order to improve turnaround time if documentation needs to be resubmitted or redone. So that already helps a lot because you have a much more trusted entity on the ground who's assisting community members to complete the process. We then created more posters, marketing material, flyers, and expanded to a few more sites in order to create awareness. Towards the end of last year, we did a road trip to many of these sites for a real understanding what was going on, to see what progress had been made. And that's where the issue of interest rates came up again. So having tackled education and awareness, interest rates continue to be an issue. I think there's two main things on this. The first is that as a bank, we link a lot of our lending products to a prime rate, which obviously fluctuates, and at the moment in a rising interest rate environment, it's going up the whole time. So I think that made community members and potential customers very uncomfortable because they didn't know from month to month what their repayments would look like. The other is again that, as my colleague Daniel alluded to earlier, as a bank, we're dealing with deposited money. So our typical interest rates are much higher than a lot of our colleagues in the room can offer. We've heard, for example, about Czech Dwellers Federation, where loans are more in the region of 5%. As a bank, you're linking your rates to prime, and you're sitting at sort of more like 15 to 18%. So back to the drawing board we went, because this was clearly still a stumbling block. And we worked with our treasury teams, and we came up with a revised product, which was a fixed rate personal loan, which is very new for us. So essentially a personal loan rate which won't change over the term of the product. And we linked that then to prime -2, which at the moment is more like 9.5%. So we could relaunch that product into the market and are doing a roadshow again in the next month. Continue to understand the market and explore our learnings there. Maybe just to mention on our when we launched this product in April, we did do a roadshow to a lot of different sites from Apuro to Okahau, all the way through to Otjiwarongo, Okakarara, and all the way down to Keetmanshoop. Focus was to take this product to market, to really explain it, but also to focus on financial literacy. So one of our colleagues who specializes in financial literacy training went with and spent a lot of time with communities on that topic. We had literally between 11 and 70 attendees at a session, but they were really well received. We had a lot of great comments around thanking F&B, or thank you F&B for showing me how to cut down on unnecessary expenses. I didn't know that by saving a small portion of my salary every month, it can make such a difference. I didn't even know what a budget looked like. I think it really highlighted to us that real help means more than funding, and the real depth of engagement is required when we're dealing with a very different market to what we're used to and a very different product. In terms of our current status, We've received 54 applications, of which 29 have been paid out and 4 have already been settled. 8 houses have been built to completion. An animation is being worked on to continue to the information and financial literacy side. And as I mentioned, we have another roadshow planned for this month to go back to all the areas and continue to better understand what is happening, how we can, what else we need to change and innovate, and looking at expanding to more sites. As I noted at the beginning, this journey has very much been one of testing a personal loan, which is a much shorter term product in this market. It's definitely not at the scale we'd want it to be at, and we'll hear from one of our colleagues from Eswatini tomorrow around a different approach using a building loan approach. And so we continue to explore these sorts of options for Namibia as well. So I've chatted about collaboration, but we also partner with communities themselves to build houses directly, so both driving development and investing in development. We've just heard from the Shack Dwellers Federation and FirstRand Namibia through the foundation, together with partners Pupkewitz Foundation and Ohorongo Cement, have directly contributed over 25 million towards this federation, contributing to funding or to building 440 houses. We've also invested, as I mentioned, Development Workshop works on a fund from which they then use to pay local contractors to service land, and we've directly invested in this fund, most recently through a $5 million investment late last year. So a community-driven approach is essential in job creation, financial stability, and improving the quality of lives and standards of living of our Namibian people. Doing what matters is at the core of our group, and it is these sorts of housing initiatives and partnerships that will help us unlock opportunities for more and more people every day. In closing, the role of banks is more than just providing money. We need to be deeply invested, to understand and value our differences, to have courage to innovate and work outside of our normal boundaries, to stay curious and do the right thing by our customers. We've started these conversations. We realize we have a long way to go, but we're fully committed to the journey.